Hello, welcome back to the YouTube channel of Bethel Evangelical Free Church Hanley. I'm Pastor Charmley, and in this video starting a new series on churches in Shropshire, and this is the Church of St John the Baptist, Stapleton. It's a very interesting church because it used to be, it's one where the floor level has been lowered essentially by putting a crypt or a lower level of the church into the main church. So originally the church was up there, and now the floor is down here. And as we look around, we'll see some of the signs of that. This is a medieval building. It's a building that looks to be from about the 13th, 14th century. It has a later tower, and of course a lot of things have been altered over the years. So as we look around, we shall see some of the evidence of how the church has been altered and modified. And so here we are, just start at the door. In fact, there is a tower here. So this is one of these churches where the tower is also the porch. You can see here this 17th, 18th century style doorway, and this would originally have led, I believe, into a sort of lower level of the church. You see the big heavy studded doors. Now, at some point, the building has been altered. Here we are, there's the font, which is a rather nice, fairly plain example. This is the poor box. All Anglican churches had them at some point, because one of the functions of the church was to provide relief for the poor. And you can see that it's a building that's been very largely altered in the 19th century. The seating, the pulpit, all the woodwork is of that date. And as we move forward, we come out from under the gallery. We see here evidence of the church was repaired and new pewed in the year 1790. The Reverend Edward Powis, rector, Mr. John Caulfield and Mr. Richard Savage, wardens, and Mr. Thomas Edwards and Mr. Richard Oakley were overseers. And the joiner was Mr. Joseph Price of Dorrington. Dorrington is the next door village and is slightly larger. And as we look here, you see you've got the niche there, and as we look up, you've got this slope now with the coping stones, but originally that was the floor level of the church. You can see here, in fact, this is the north door. The north door now is, we back up, making sure not to trip over any pews on the way. The north door is now quite some way above the floor level, but that was the north door, and originally you can see that was the floor level. And what has happened is that the floor level has been lowered. A crypt that used to exist down here has been made part of the main church. And the result is rather interesting, because of course it means that all the doors that used to be on the upper level are now, well, no longer functioning as doors. You see that there are these slit windows in the lower level, but the main windows are up in the main body of the church. There's that nice eagle lectern, and there isn't a screen, and obviously the medieval church would have looked very, very, very different, and we'll see more as we get into the chancel. You can see there's no screen, but there is this low coping, and there is a stone base with an oak pulpit on top of it. Choir stalls, of course. They've been doing some work on the floor, you can see. In fact, still doing work on the floor. And here we have another memorial to a former rector, the Reverend and Honourable Charles W.A. Fielding, for 30 years rector of Stapleton, born 1833, entered into rest St. Andrew's Day 1893. Beloved by all, this church was restored and the school built by his efforts, the brass placed by his brothers and sisters. And here we look straight west. You can see the gallery, which is now largely occupied by the organ, but also has some capacity for overflow seating. There's stairs in the tower that get up there, and originally, of course, that was the floor level. So the gallery floor is where the floor of the whole church used to be. There's a vestry through here, Pedestrian Kitchen, which is quite quite normal for at least to have some sort of tea, coffee, light refreshment making equipment in the vestries. And this again is 19th century. But you can see how tall the church has become by extending, as it were, downwards into the crypt. The crypt would probably have been used for burials, and there's certain evidence here that it was for burials. And that suggests that when the crypt was made part of the church, of the main church, all the burials would have been removed. There's no evidence that the crypt was stone vaulted. It would instead have had a wooden floor, just as the gallery had that wooden floor. So it might have been quite unpleasant at times. But then again, in the past, people's ideas of hygiene were slightly different. You have these candle uplighters, and there is the priest's door. And again, you can see it's not usable anymore because it's just so tall, so high up. And there's the aumbry. That's well, it was a little cupboard. Quite possibly that actually may be the piscine. It's in the right place with the piscine. And again, there's the replacement lower down. And you can see, by putting the floor level right down here, what they've done is they've essentially meant that you get a very, very tall church with these features like doors and the probable piscine, certainly aumbry there, that is now so high up that nobody can reach it. So it's a very unusual building. This is the modern day piscina. There's no evidence of a piscina on that side, and that is an original window. So looking at these windows, actually, if this is going to be 12th, 13th century with these early English windows. The communion table, the front is made of old panelling, and that panelling is quite probably originally from a secular source, not from a church. And again, you've got these little windows behind the sedilia there. Very interesting. It's a very strange building because it's had this downwards extension, and evidence as to the fact that it used to have burials here. You've got these niches, another one on that side, which kind of look as though they might have something to do with burials. But also, lighting down here would have been abysmal. So why have a space in this level? Well, the answer really is that it would be a place for burials. Again, these open-backed Victorian benches, quite popular at the time. The Victorians, most of them didn't like pews. And the higher church people called pews all kinds of rude names. And they said, no, what we want is medieval-style benches. Now, of course, actually, when this church was originally built, back in the 12th, 13th century, there wouldn't have been any benches, any seating. People would be expected to stand through the service, and there might have been some benches along the walls to lean on. There might not have been, but seating didn't really come in as a thing for everybody until the 15th century, when the sermon becomes more important. Remember that medieval worship is centred upon the Mass. It's centred upon the priest making the offering. And that's the idea, certainly of the Mass. It's the idea of the Mass as a sacrifice. And the people are expected to stand. And the service didn't necessarily have a sermon. But in the 15th century, the 14th century, you've got the rise of Wycliffe and the Lollards. And the Lollards are evangelical preachers. They're not fully reformed. They don't have, of course, a Bible translated from the original languages. But they preach. And you also have the appeal of the preaching friars. And one of the things about the friars is because the friars are preaching, the friars are making things more difficult for the parish clergy because people are giving money to the friars. The friars are mendicant orders, that is, that they are religious orders who are beggars. They beg for money. And so they're preaching and asking for money at the same time. So the local clergy some of them begin to think in terms of preaching, and seats then are introduced because people want to sit in the service, in the sermon. So at the Reformation, you've already got churches with benches. You see these in Norfolk, the earliest really of 14th century, 15th century. You can see these, we saw some at Blore Ray in the Staffordshire Moorlands. And they don't look like this. They're much simpler. But of course the Victorians have this very romanticised idea of the Middle Ages. The Middle Ages, the age of chivalry, if you're Walter Scott or Tennyson, the ages of faith, if you are the Oxford movement, the ritualists. And it's a much more elegant idea than the reality was. So Stapleton is a building that's medieval, but the Victorians have made it feel more medieval, allegedly, except of course they haven't. Well, here we have another memorial to a former member of the congregation here, and in fact the son of a former rector. And this is quite interesting because it's to do with the Victorian colonial era. So, to the glory of God and in loving memory of Bertram Francis Percy Fielding, Lieutenant Duke of Edinburgh's 62nd Wiltshire Regiment, attached to the Uganda Rifles, second son of the Reverend Honourable A.W.A.F. Fielding, late rector of Stapleton, who fell in action while suppressing the mutiny at Fort Lubwas, Usoga, Central Africa, on October the 19th, 1897, aged 27 years, and was buried in the cathedral at Kampala, Uganda. Dulce est et decorum est pro patria mori. It is a good and honourable thing to die for your country, is what the Latin means. And here we see a reminder of this Victorian colonialism that, through various things, mostly accidental actually, Britain ends up with this foreign empire that then has to be defended. And the native troops are recruited to do it. But as the mutiny at Fort Lubwas indicates, some of them decided that actually if we have guns from the white men, then we can rise up and fight the white men. Well, these mutinies were suppressed, but they're a reminder that the colonial era, even 1897, the height of Victorian colonialism, you've got these rebellions, these mutinies going on, and of course eventually in the 20th century this breaks out into full-fledged independence movements. Unfortunately, not all the nations end up with governments that are any good, and of course Uganda has Idi Amin and his awful violent regime. So there we are. This is the inside of Stapleton. As you see, it's basically a Victorian interior, again because you've had this floor taken out. Back in 1790, the floor would have been there. So everything that Mr. Price of Dorrington made, apart from the board here, has disappeared because the floor's been taken out. Well, we'll go outside and have a look around. So here we are outside at St. John's, Stapleton. You can really see here the medieval church and the tower that is very much 18th century with that sort of design, those round-headed windows, the somewhat playful coins. Actually, I very much like the tower here. It does have, as I said, that playful feel to it, that it's an addition that isn't trying to look medieval. It's saying, well, this is a church tower, so there's a certain form it should follow, but at the same time we're not going to go over the top. You can just see over there, that's the old rectory that's now in private hands, I suspect anyway. Might have been something else, but the church lies just behind here there's the manor house, and there's the park bit of parkland visible there. It's not a huge manor. No, that's going to be the old rectory over there, actually, so that's going to be the schoolmaster's house. So, because the old rectory can just be seen through the trees there, that whiteness with its Gothic-y windows. Yeah, obviously, the rectors had quite a lot of money here. It's a building that says, you've got your manor house, you've got your big old rectory with its Gothic-y windows, and you've got this church with its tower and its later alteration. Now, let's go and have a look at it a bit up close. You can see immediately the difference in stonework. I mean, it's even a different type of stone from a different quarry that you've got in the tower. And this red stone, which is the local stone. You can just see there the door that would originally have led down into the crypt. And here, as we get to the chancel end, the other thing you can see is that the ground falls away in that direction, which means that you can get into the crypt more easily, or you could get into the crypt when it was a crypt, more easily from the west end. But here, at the east end, you have the priest's door, which of course cannot be used these days. Yes, that is the schoolmaster's house there. You have the priest's door that cannot be used these days. You have the windows behind the sedilia visible there. There's the war memorial, sign saying Dorrington in that direction. And the hills beyond, that's looking over Wales, is in that general direction. But it is a very notable building. There's not a lot. Well, it's rather difficult to get all the way round the building, but we'll see what we can do at the east end here. You see how high up the windows are, and this band of stone is the crypt floor level. So those windows are were quite high up originally, and they are really high up now. The original entrance, it would seem, would have been on the north side, because yes, it's higher up on the north side. So originally, there would have been a door, and there's the north door. So the doors, it'd have to be accessed by steps, probably made of wood, but still. The north, and those are the windows into the crypt, those slit windows. And so we pass around here, all the way to the front door. I'll back up as far as possible to get the door. There it is, and there's the door. It's a very simple door these days. Graveyard is one of those good old country graveyards, still apparently in use, which is a good thing. And so here we are. You can see where there would, of course, originally, you'd have gone into the tower and there'd have been stairs, and that's because there still are stairs, but the stairs would have taken you up to the main level, and then you've got the belfry up above, and now you've got the bell ringers would be on the level there behind the gallery. So there we are, St John the Baptist, Stapleton, a fascinating little medieval church that has been massively altered simply by throwing the crypt into the main church and extending the whole thing downwards. I hope you enjoyed this video. I certainly enjoy making them, going out on this very, very hot day and enjoying the relative cool of the Shropshire hills. Well, thank you for watching, and God bless you and keep you. Amen.